Welcome to A Moment of Bach, where we take our favorite moments from the composer's vast musical output, just a minute's worth or even a few seconds, and show you why we think they are remarkable. We are your hosts, Christian Giebert and Alex Giebert. Today is a special episode. We have a guest, and we've been looking forward to this for a really long time because it was his idea to bring this moment to our attention, and that is the composer and guitarist Giovanni Piacentini. Welcome, Giovanni.
Hi, Christian, Alex. Thanks for having me. This is great. Very happy to talk to you guys today.
Yeah, so I met Giovanni in doctoral school at UCLA. He's a really accomplished composer and educator. Can you tell us just quickly a little about what you've been working on recently, Giovanni?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And right back at you. It's really nice to connect. Again, I haven't seen you in a while, and so it's very nice to be talking to you and to be talking to you about a topic that we love, that we have in common, which is Bach. So anyway, a little bit about me. I'm a composer and a guitar player based in Los Angeles, and I'm originally from Mexico City, even though I have a very Italian name. I was born and raised in Mexico City. And I've been writing and playing music for all my life. It's pretty much held me hostage for as long as I can remember. And nowadays, I just premiered a guitar concerto with amazing legendary guitarist Elliot Fisk. This was last year in Mexico City. And this year, this next month, I'm actually flying down to Mexico City again to not only perform the concerto again, and what I mean, have it performed, by Elliot and the orchestra down there, but we're also going to record it. And as part of this project, we are also going to record Ian Krause's Symphony No. 2. Now, Ian Krause is one of my mentors, and I know that you also studied with him, Christian, at UCLA. He's a fantastic composer, just all around great person, and really just a phenomenal composer. Every day that I study his music, I just learn something new, and I'm just in awe of his talent for expressing himself musically. So we have this big symphony No. 2. It's a 45-minute piece in 8 movements that has a very prominent guitar part, which, as I was telling Christian earlier, originally was 2 guitar parts, and he condensed it into 1, which I will be performing. So it's a lot of notes to learn, but I'm very excited about this project. And so the idea is to make an album with my guitar concerto played by Elliot Fisk, and then Ian's symphony performed by yours truly. So it's going to be a very cool project, and I'm very excited about. So that's a little bit of what I've been up to lately, compositionally.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about the big man, Johann Sebastian Bach, which is case in point here. And moments in Bach, right? There's so many. It's hard to choose, but there's one in particular that, as you mentioned when you told me you were doing this podcast, I was like, have I got a cool moment for you? So from Prelude, Fugue and Allegro, BWV 998. This is a very popular piece for guitarists. And the reason for that is because the piece was originally written for, on the manuscript, you see it written for lute or cembalo or harpsichord. And so, all the pieces that have this, written for lute, written at the beginning, they translate pretty well to the guitar. And this is definitely the case for this beautiful Prelude, Fugue and Allegro. The fugue is gorgeous. It's a longer format fugue than we see for solo lute instruments. And then the Allegro is a beast of a piece. It's very, very fun to play if you can actually get around to mastering the technical difficulty of it. It's very demanding. And then we have this gorgeous Prelude, a very famous piece, again, not only for guitar players, but just for music lovers. Has this very famous and well-known theme at the beginning. Et cetera. Very well-known theme. And the moment that in particular that I want to draw your attention to happens later towards the second half of this prelude. And I want to, before I play the actual moment, I want to take it back a few measures and play leading up to this moment. So harmonically speaking, we are in D major is the key the guitarists use, just because D major is a very easy key for guitar. The original key, I think, is E flat major, which is kind of a terrible key for guitars. We can use one of these capos, but this time I'll be playing it and/or analyzing it in the key of D major. So I want to take it from measure, and again, these measures may or may not coincide with different versions. I'm reading from the Thomas Koenig's version, or the arrangement rather, which is a very popular one. A lot of people have this arrangement, but if the exact measures don't map onto each other, at least you get the idea of where I am in the prelude. Okay, so after taking us through some really interesting harmonic movement as Bach usually does, we land on this one, on the tonic, or D major, and we get this bass descent that is really interesting. We start with 1. So right there, it's a surprise because we start with 1 and we get the flat 7. So this becomes essentially like the 5 of 4, really. But instead of getting, good old B natural, which would be kind of like the more familiar sound that we would expect to hear from that descending bass line, right? We get the B flat. Which takes us then to a beautiful cadence to the minor subdominant, so to minor 4. This is a big surprise because remember, all along we've been going swimmingly in pretty much D major, some twists and turns, but mostly just 1, 4, 5, 5, 1, lot of 5, 1, lot of 5, 1. And then suddenly we get this. And then we're like, oh, okay, 5 of 4, but we get B flat. First surprise. And then a big cadence on G minor or 4 minor. And then, but that's not the moment that I wanted to show you. That's another, I guess, cool moment. But the moment that I wanted to show you is what happens after this. So we land in G minor, 4 minor, and then we get the theme again, sort of like a reiteration of the theme. And so far so good, right? The G minor, or 4 minor, but then we get this beautiful Napolitan sound. So listen, I'll play the whole thing. Right, so suddenly we get this Napolitan sound.
Yeah. So the flat 2.
See, E flat major. Yeah, or flat 2. In this case, you could argue that it's flat 2, or if you consider this cadence to be strong enough, you could make an argument that you actually modulated the G minor. That's probably a more modern way of thinking about it. But sure, let's call it flat 2.
Yeah.
How cool is that? Completely unexpected. So we go from a very unexpected 4 minor. Whoa. Absolutely gorgeous. And then, the moment we've all been waiting for, this chord. Woo! So I definitely had a field trip when I came across this chord.
Yeah, that's amazing. Christian told me you were going to give us a moment from this, and I listened to it, and I was like, I bet it's this chord. Like, it's just... Yeah,
it's... After I sort of like was struck and really interested in it, I started to do a little research, and I did find out that, I wasn't the only one that was sort of like baffled with this particular moment. But I'm not surprised. It's a gorgeous moment. So I don't know if it's even worth, analyzing it, or, how deep you want to go into the actual, Roman numeral analysis of all that stuff. But it's actually, what's most interesting, I think, is that it's actually not that complicated. It just sounds really, really cool. And the reason why it sounds so cool, or one of the reasons why it sounds so cool, is because it has this suspension. It has a 4/3 suspension. So essentially, it's in seventh chord with a 4/3 suspension, that leads us beautifully back into D major. A7, back home to D major. So what I'll do is I'll play it now from that little bass line descent right into this moment so you can get the idea instead of me just talking about it. So here it is. Back home to D major. So one way to look at this is, we went to this beautiful G minor, 4 minor, Napolitan or flat second. And the Napolitan, you usually, or our ears are used to hearing the Napolitan resolve to 5, right? It's going something like this. Right? And then maybe back to G minor. This is what I guess is implied in the harmony. That this Napolitan chord is going to go back to D7 and maybe resolve back to G minor in this case, because we're coming from it. Right?
Because that's the G minor approach, right? But for me, I wondered like that chord, that moment. What if it was, currently it's an E. I'm trying to think of it in your transposition. It's E major with the D on the bottom, right? So
correct. That's right.
What if it was a 4/2 chord? Yeah. So what if it was a major with a G on the bottom? So that would just be like because you're in D major. So the bass note would stay the same. Yeah. So right. So the bass note stays the same. I wonder where that could you play that?
Yes, of course. So it'll be.
Yeah, that's kind of where right. That sounds more normal to me.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds more normal to, I think, anybody. But Bach's not normal, right? What does he do?
This is why we love him. Yeah.
He takes us from this gorgeous Napolitan sound. Instead, he takes us up. He ascends to this. We have this moment, which is crazy. I mean, if you think that this piece was written in 1735, around, I mean, that's kind of like an insane harmonic movement.
It's pretty wild, yeah.
It's pretty wild, and but that's not enough for Herr Bach, because he gives us not only this movement, but he gives us a suspension which creates this chord. So we're going.
Right. So the melodic motion, then da da da.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're getting a
suspension is not set up. It's not set up normally
like
they normally would do.
Absolutely. So that's another huge surprise of this. And then he brings us back so elegantly back to D major. Always in inversions, of course. Right, et cetera.
And then it really doesn't feel like D major yet, even in the measure after that chord, even though it lands on D major, because you still have to hear it D, G, A, D, and then it feels, okay, now it's a cadence, because now I hear the G natural again. And now you really
because you land really in an A major in first inversion, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
With a C sharp in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally you get... So a very elegant way to take us back to D major after having gone on a pretty distant trip. First to G minor, right? Let's not forget this beautiful G minor.
Yeah.
Then Napolitan. Don't forget, he spells out the Napolitan chord twice. So that's actually a very important chord for him. And then finally landing on this beautiful suspension. Back to, and lo and behold, he takes us back to the actual theme.
Yeah. The pedal point now.
Yeah, pedal point, exactly. So just a gorgeous moment.
a moment that for me was very important because it helped me realize just the depth of the richness, the harmonic and melodic richness of Bach's music. And a very important moment also because it reminds us how harmony really is built out of this interplay between the voices, right? This counterpoint between voices. I don't know. I just think that for me, it was an entryway because this is one of the first pieces that I learned, maybe in my second or third, maybe fourth year playing guitar at a very young age. So obviously there you just think that this is a really wild chord. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
It sounds very cool. But then you start learning a little bit more about theory and you start, analyzing these things and just finding this world of, again, lush, rich chords and just surprises. A word that comes very common to me is surprises. It's Bach's music has always been very surprising, and it takes all kinds of unexpected twists and turns. So this is one of the major ones for me.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I got to say, for me, there's so many reasons why this is a moment. All the stuff you just described, and also one kind of subtle thing is just, and you mentioned it with the bass walk down, but the bass walk down is different there. And then like he knows this is a moment he's going for. He doesn't just do harmonic, interesting things here. He's also changing the texture as he's changing the harmonies in a weird way. And then when he gets to that moment that you talked about, the chord, he puts a fermata there. And then as you played so beautifully, to come out of that it's just like an extra little gesture. It's like, he knows this
like a little
the moment.
ornament.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a very good point that I forgot to mention. There is a fermata right on this when he after the suspension, right? So he wants you to now have a little moment, take a little breather, a little moment to take in what just happened. And so that's an excellent point. He's making a point of having you know that this is a very important moment in the piece and one that he wants to draw your attention to. So that's my little moment in Bach.
I love it. Thanks, Giovanni. That's fantastic. I love to hear all the different interpretations that guitarists and lutists are doing with this too. And sometimes they take that moment and they hit it hard, and then other times they move up in that Neapolitan measure, they move up to the moment, and then they hit the moment soft. It's always interesting to see the different interpretations.
Another good point. It's very interesting to see that. This is one of those moments where I think you might agree that it doesn't really need very much. That's another thing that I've discovered more and more as I study Bach's music, is that it really doesn't need us very much. It kind of does its own thing. So even if you were to play this, with very little interpretation, in quotes, that moment would still strike you as something that still today in the year 2023, to our ears, it's something that's very, it's very kind of strange and beautiful.
Yeah. And Bach, we've talked about this on the podcast. Bach is one of the most objective composers in that way. Like, yes, you can make your own interpretation, but as you said, Bach is Bach, right? Like, it's going to be solid no matter what, because the music is just so well constructed.
It's just such a jewel. I love this music so much, and I haven't played it in a while, so I'm happy to revisit it.
Oh, that's great.
No, actually, it's funny because I was just telling Christian that I'm very thankful that you guys invited me to do this, because it's not common for me that I get the free quote unquote free time to go back to these pieces that I kind of like grew up with. I've been listening to this Prelude for a very, very long time, and performing it and playing it and listening to different versions of it. So it's music that has lived with me for a very, very long time.
Cool.
But unfortunately, as of late, I haven't had the time to go back and revisit it. And so I'm very grateful. Just before I got on here, I was just looking at the score and kind of like remembering the different sections, and it's a piece that I love very much. Et cetera, et cetera.
That was the cool moment. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good.
Amazing. I can't. That's another thing. It's like, do you have any idea how many times I've played this thing? This particular moment? Probably, I don't know, tens of thousands of times. And I never get bored of it. I always just want to go back and play it again. And I don't know about you, Christian, but that doesn't happen with my music very often.
No, it doesn't really happen with our own music to ourselves, you know.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're a little too close to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is amazing to think about that Bach, since he wrote so much. I mean, there was a lot of care put into it, but so don't misconstrue what I'm saying. But since he wrote so much, this little figure probably took him, 30 seconds to compose. And yet millions of people have heard it millions of times and have been inspired by it and have felt very strongly about this moment. It's just amazing.
Here we are centuries later, talking about just these few measures of his music. So, but that's amazing. That's great. And by the way, I just want to say that I think this podcast, this idea for this podcast is fantastic. It's something that, I would have loved to do myself. And I'm sure that a lot of music lovers around the world are gonna not only love it, but also like learn a lot from it. And hopefully it becomes like an entryway for other people that don't know Bach's music that well or at all. If there are still people like that out there. So you're doing the world a huge service. So thank you.
Well, yeah, you're welcome. We evangelize Bach.
You do.
And we've had some really cool suggestions over the last couple of years. So that's been really, we've learned a lot too from people's suggestions.
Very cool. Well, thank you. And if you ever run out of musical moments, give me a call. I got a few as well. So I'd love to, talk about Bach anytime.
If this introduction to a musical moment has inspired you to hear more J.S. Bach compositions, please check out the All of Bach project by the Netherlands Bach Society. They're whose recordings we use in most of our episodes.
We are indebted to the Netherlands Bach Society because of the permission to use their recordings. We are able to do this podcast. So thanks again to Netherlands Bach Society. Okay, Christian, next week, Bachtoberfest?
That's right. Next week is the last episode of our season where we celebrate Bach by doing a little more than a normal episode. We'll take a look at something silly like we have done with the Quodlibet and the Coffee Cantata. And we'll also take some listener questions. So if you have any, please send them our way before next week. Any questions about the podcast or Bach? We'll read a couple of suggestions. If you have a suggestion for an episode for next season, we'll read some of those. We'll mention some of the suggestions that we didn't get to this season because we have so many. But we hope to hear from you. And if you give us permission, we'd love to share your thoughts at Bachtoberfest.
And listeners, in Season 1, you helped us reach a big milestone, 10,000 episode downloads. Well, our listenership has grown, and now at the end of Season 3 here, we are almost at 100,000 downloads. Pretty exciting for us. It's pretty close. And by pretty close, I mean we have 99,860 currently. So, I bet you can help us crest this hill here and make it to our goal of 100K. And if so, we'll announce that at Bachtoberfest.
One of our favorite things to hear is that you shared this podcast with another person. I think that's the best we could hope for. So who do you think would enjoy a Bach podcast? Please share our podcast with that person.
Yeah, and the answer is anybody who likes music. I mean, it doesn't even have to be somebody who likes classical music. Bach is a good in for any musician to get into the realm of Baroque music, for example. But really, anybody who likes music might enjoy the podcast.
That's true. Bach's music is pretty approachable. I think, it's not really stuffy or self-important as far as classical music goes.
So listeners, we look forward to joining you next week for Bachtoberfest.
Until next time, enjoy those moments.